happy that you're all here. Should we do like a little introduction for people that don't know us? Why don't you go
Yes,
ahead first?
please. So I'm Debra Pascali Bonaro, and I am a mother and a grandmother, but I have been a doula and a doula trainer for over 30 years this year. So this is like a big year for me in celebrating that. And I'm also the director of the documentary Orgasmic Birth and co-author of the book Orgasmic Birth, Your Guide to a Safe, Satisfying, and Pleasurable Birth. So I often like to say I wear all different hats in kind of maternity care. And another big hat that I wear is to chair the International Mother-Baby Childbirth Initiative, working, as I like to think about it, from grassroots in communities to grass tops at ministries of health in creating respectful, optimal quality care with love and compassion. So really a whole lot of different areas, all birth related, but my favorite is today, working and talking about pleasure, and such a joy to be doing it with you, Sheila.
Oh, thank you. I'm so excited to be doing it with you too. I met Debra right after I'd had my third birth, and my third birth was this incredible ecstatic experience, and I got really emotional afterwards. I kept saying to my husband, I don't understand, like, why didn't I know birth could be this good? Why doesn't every woman know? And I was starting to feel like I wanted to be a part of bringing that message out into the world. And I spoke to my mentor, Dr. Christiane Northrup, who was like, you must meet Debra. She's creating this incredible documentary. And so I reached out to Debra. How can I help? How can I support? And that was really the beginning of our relationship. I've been running my business, Ecstatic Birth, for 7 years now. And it really began as a way to share my teachers with the world and to give women the wisdom that I've been privileged to. And from there, I've been doing consultations with women, really helping a woman who was in that stage where I was at with my first birth, where I wanted to have this beautiful, really deeply empowering experience, but I didn't know how. So I've been working with women privately like that. And also 3 years ago, I started a training for practitioners because I realized my bandwidth is only so much and I can only reach a certain number of women. But if I could share with practitioners all the body practices that I'd learned, then they could take it out to all of their clients. So for 3 years now, I've been doing a ecstatic birth practitioner training. And what that is really like, I've come to realize it's sort of sexual education for birth practitioners. I've become, without even realizing it, a bit of a sexual educator, because what we do is a ton of embodiment practices where you really learn how to access pleasure within your own body and how to hold the tone for that with your clients. I've been really privileged to be immersed in the world of pleasure for the last 12 years as a student and guest speaker and member of Mama Gina's School of Womanly Arts community, where we really delve into the practice of pleasure. And I've brought all of that work into the birth world. So really excited to be here today and share some of those juicy, pleasurable tips for bringing pleasure into births with your clients.
Oh, fantastic. And I have to say, Sheila, it's hard to believe it's only been 7 years. Like when you said 7 years, I lost track of the time. And for me, I probably would have guessed at least 10 or more. And what you're contributing and what you're doing, right, is making such a difference. So this is really a joy to be working together and to know that it started from that little spark, right? And it's amazing how things blossom and grow.
Yeah. Well, I'm really grateful to you for being a pioneer and paving the way and playing with me in this realm.
And now to welcome all of you, I'm kind of watching the chat a little bit too. And so let's get started, right? And those of you that are on the chat, please, we love to hear your comments, questions. So keep introducing yourself. If you're new and you just joined, we love to know where you are in the world and what your connection is to pleasure and to birth. And I'm going to start us off with birth ambience, creating your birth environment and setting the stage, because I feel this is so important. And whether we're a pregnant, mama, partner, doula, midwife, nurse, whatever your role in birth, we have to set that stage. So one of the things I always love to ask, and everybody that's listening can just take a moment and imagine that tonight you're planning the most sensuous, intimate, sacred, private, and safe time for yourself. And whether this is to explore your body or to just have sacred time, whatever it is that feels safe to you at this moment, I want you to then think about, what would you like the lighting to be? Do you like darkness, candle lights, dim lights? I like holiday lights with the sparkles. You know how you can get all different colors and they can twinkle on and off. So, be creative with set the stage for lighting. And then think about, what smell would you kind of invite in? And we all have different smells that just that smell takes us to that yummy, relaxed, peaceful, sacred place. And what would you like to hear? And some of us like quiet, others there's a certain genre, an artist, a song, and the minute that comes on, you can feel your body shift and move and feel really luscious. And what kind of, maybe there's tastes. We all sometimes have flavors or foods that, I always say dark chocolate is orgasmic to me. So is there a food that could be part of it? And is there touch? Is there a place that you like touch? Do you feel safe with touch? How do you like touch? And that's engaging every sense. And when you think about it, when you're giving birth, every sense is heightened. So when you envision what you like for every sense, then I'd like to ask you, is that what's in the environment you plan to give birth? And for those of you that are moving into a hospital, that might be wow, is a hospital a place that I could really feel safe and sacred and intimate? And if not, one, consider maybe another birthplace. But what could you bring with you? You can bring different sights. You can bring those sparkly lights or electric candles. I don't know anyone in an intimate environment that brings hospital aroma to say, that's my favorite smell. I've traveled the world and haven't met anybody that put that on their list of safe, satisfying, sacred, and sexy. So with that, bring aromatherapy. There are just so many ways that you can bring these different elements, because when you change the ambiance, when you change the environment, you can then begin to shift into pleasure.
Amazing. Yes, birth ambiance. And I would say to each of you, if you imagine yourself in that setting that Debra is describing, imagine yourself in that place with dim lighting and candlelight, or luscious scents, velvety fabrics, whatever it is that gives you that sensual, sexual feeling. Just feel into, what does that do for your body? So my tip is, use pleasure consciously to create flow. So one of the things that really disrupts labor is when your flow is interrupted. And sometimes when the sensations get kicked up, and that could trigger some fear, some resistance, what ends up happening is something like this energetically, where you're clamping down and you're restricting flow. You're restricting blood flow, you're restricting energy flow, and you're really resisting the flow of labor. But if you can imagine what pleasure does to your body, that if you walk into a space that's designed for a goddess, it feels like an exhale to the body. Because see, when we're experiencing pleasure, we can't be in that space of fear and resistance. Hormonally, the two cannot coexist. So when you're in that place of fear and resistance and you're disrupting the flow of your labor, what you're actually doing is you're requiring your body to work harder, which is kicking up the level of intensity of sensation, which can then kick up more fear, and you downward spiral from there. But you can disrupt that, that chain of events by using pleasure consciously to bring flow. So, things like warm baths, very simple to kind of create flow in the body. Massage, right? Sensual environment, as Debra said. And pleasure is unique to every person. So it could be also sensual pleasure, or it could be, a beautiful image that you have on the wall that you can kind of source your pleasure from. But the idea is that when you're experiencing pleasure, you can't really be in that place of resistance. Pleasure allows you to consciously create flow in the body, which then supports the birthing process as opposed to disrupts it.
Beautiful. Ah, so good. When you were talking, I could already feel my body moving, and just the thought of everything just relaxing and flowing.
Yeah.
So my next tip, and it flows so well in that, because you talked, Jill, a bit about how we can get fear and that gets tense. And my tip is how to enhance the hormones of pleasure and loving through labor, because fear or tension, right, creates the stress hormones, adrenaline and cortisol, that'll actually slow or stop labor and make it both longer, harder, and more painful. And we get into that kind of fear, tension, pain cycle where then with more pain, the more tension, the more fear, and we have a downward spiral. But as you said, if we flip it into really being in that pleasure state, what we're trying to do is release the hormone oxytocin. And oxytocin is the hormone of love, of calm, of connection, just eye contact. Like I can feel the change in our body today being here with you. And even though it's a computer screen, you know, I feel your joy, your passion, our connection, and the oxytocin goes up. But also, as you said, touch, all different ways. But if you have a loving partner, then couple tips, really talk with your partner on what would they do to love you through labor, and really be honest. What are the things that you really love? It might be words that they say to you, and those just fill your heart, and you can feel that shift when you hear them. And so when labor's challenging, you know, to just have someone whisper certain loving things that are special to you in your ear can begin to shift our flow. What about touch? Where do you like touch? Do you like stroking? And this could be self-stroking and touch. What other ways can you love yourself through labor? And I do want to add yourself, because I think as women, we're often really bad at loving ourselves. We often are like, oh, you know, I don't like this hip, or, you know, I don't my hair today. And when we're giving birth, we are just full of radiance, and you want to really be able to love yourself. You want to feel comfortable in this new body. It's the most creative, full of life body you will ever have. So truly think about, how can you love yourself and release that hormone of oxytocin and keep that flow going in every way.
So good. And I love that too, because sometimes our men, they want to support us, or our partners, they just want to support us but don't know how and feel so helpless. So being able to have that conversation is so huge. I want to throw out this idea for my next tip of rebirthing with each birth. So you all as practitioners, you know, you might see yourselves as support or kind of bystanders or on the side, but the truth is that every birth experience for you is a rebirth. And what I mean by that is, you know, every birth has its flow. So if you imagine the laboring mom, she's going through this flow of expansion and contraction with mounting intensity. You as the support person, as a practitioner in the room, are experiencing a rebirth in relation to your own body, in your own relationship to birth, in relation to this woman, in relationship to your role as a practitioner. So what I'm trying to say with that is your shit might get kicked up, right? You might have like really strong, intense reactions, sensations in your own body in response to the birth, or you might have really blissful, you know, ecstatic, orgasmic reactions in your own body in response to the birth. And both are absolutely perfect, but to be able to actually view your own experience through that birth as a sort of rebirth allows you to really use it for your own growth as a practitioner, as a person, as a woman, and to really, once you have that, that intuitive connection to your body and the sensations of your body, you can really use that for information as to, oh, wow, like I was really resistant to this happening, or I was really triggered by that happening. And then you can look at that and really use that as a starting point for your own expansion and your own growth.
Fantastic. So I love this. We just keep building, right? All the different tips flowing and watching you all. So My next is talking about comfort and touch. And those of you, we have educators and doulas and midwives with us. It's really important to me, and I always like to ask this question. Think about the birth environment that you're entering with your client, and can you quickly list 10 things for comfort that are available to them? And so really right now, put on your thinking caps, because I'm surprised how often I say that. Now, some of you may work in wonderful environments, and you can not only give 10, you can give 20 or 30, and that's awesome. But I have a lot of people that work in typical hospitals, especially here in the US, where people like look at me like 10 things for comfort, and they often like go a pillow, and I'm like, I wouldn't even call a hospital pillow something that's comfortable. They're horrible. So when we're down to the pillow as your comfort thing, we're in trouble. So we as birth keepers have to really think, okay, what can we then bring or help our clients to bring and package so that they have things for comfort? And some of those things are the things we just talked about, right? How can they access that flow? How can they touch and love themselves and that? But some of the things we want to think about are things that typically aren't coming into birth. Singing brings a whole different thing to the place. You can be in the strangest circumstance and just begin to sing, and everything shifts, and it shifts everybody in the room. The music that you put on, we already talked about, can do that. And what about dancing? I was watching a video last night. We were talking about Lauren, and I'm like, I think we have to dance this baby out into the world. And we were looking at some women dancing in labor, and the one video, I don't know if you all have seen, but it actually is the woman, her doctor, her nurse, and another caregiver, and she's 6 centimeters dilated, and they've choreographed this dance. And of course, you only see 1 minute of it, because I'm assuming she had a surge and it all like stopped. But if those times in between, but other things we need are, as you talked about, access to water, acupressure is just phenomenal. And I hope all of you that are listening know the acupressure point, Hogu, on the hands, where we really just press, in the muscle here and squeeze. But there's so many comfort tips, and I would just encourage everyone that's attending a birth to make sure that you have at least 10 things right at your fingertip that you can shift into in any environment to bring comfort and pleasure. And obviously have your clients create their own list so that you all know what they are.
Awesome. And that actually leads so perfectly into my next tip, which is holding the tone in our bodies. So to build on what Debra was saying, I would encourage you all as practitioners to also have comfort things that you can reach for yourselves, because the birthing field is extremely porous. As we know, if somebody's in the room that's full of fear or anxiety, the birthing woman is going to pick up on that. So we want, as practitioners, as much as possible to be able to hold the tone in our own body for flow, for pleasure, for ecstasy. We want to be able to open and access to that. So that'll include those moments when you do get triggered. What can you reach for comfort as a practitioner? What are the thoughts, the tangible objects? What are your practices that you can reach for to enable the flow to resume in your body? When you're hitting your own personal moment of resistance or trigger, what are the things that you can reach for consciously, pleasurably, to create flow in your body so that you can hold the tone for the birthing woman? Because really that's your job. That's why you're there. And that's why all of these studies really show that the presence of a loving, unafraid woman in birth changes everything. Because when you're unafraid and when you're in flow, you're contagious. And you are energetically giving that to the birthing woman. So the biggest gift you can give her is to be able to hold that tone in your own body and then take it to the next level of being able to hold the tone for pleasure, hold the tone for oxytocin, hold the tone for orgasm in your own body so that you can be contagious to the birthing mama and she can absorb that from you.
Beautiful. And Sheila, as you're talking, it just reminds me of a story sometimes I share at my workshops that I learned this from Indigenous midwives. Indigenous midwives have always known that our emotions are contagious. And when a labor is taking longer than what you would think, or the woman is having strong surges, but her body's not opening in response, they often, of course, first check in with the woman. Is she holding, right, any fear? But the next thing they do is look around the room. And I was at a birth, and the midwife like looked at everybody, including me, and like, are you the one that's holding the fear? Like, somebody in this room is not running the emotion of love. And until we all flow in oxytocin, it only takes one person in fear. Like right now, wherever you're sitting, everyone, if someone walked into your space that was afraid, you, without words, you would feel that energy and it would trigger a shift in you. And so we are so sensitive and porous, and our role is so much to run that flow and keep our oxytocin and love present. But that day when that midwife turned at me and was like, are you the one? I was like, oh my goodness, no, I don't think it's me, but I better check in. Like, am I responsible? And then I had my hair up at the time, and she yelled at me because my hair had to be down and everything had to be open symbolically. Any symbol of closure had to be opened, including the windows.
Oh, wow.
So
where was this?
This was in Mexico, in the mountains of Mexico. And I thought, interesting that, indigenous traditional midwives, this was common practice for them to recognize the energy of connection.
That's amazing. Very cool.
Isn't that cool?
Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah. No, thank you, because it all just kind of flowed together, and it goes to the next one of unlocking sexual energy. And so again, we as caregivers, right, have to hold that space, because if people don't feel private, safe, and unobserved, and those are the three criteria that must exist for anyone to have a gentle, pleasurable birth. Without feeling safe, we're not going to allow ourselves to open to the deepest parts. For most of us, we need privacy. And privacy is defined by us. Some people, privacy is like me all alone. And some people, privacy, right, is with their partner. And some people, privacy can still be with other people around, but people that are being respectful and not feeling observed. So it's different to have people there if they're just like watching you like a pot of water boiling, versus having a presence and really holding space. So safety, privacy, and unobserved. And I do always say that being observed can be ourselves. I think as women, again, we all know those moments where we're like, how do I look? Are these sounds okay? And the minute we start self-observing, it's very hard to release into that sexual energy, because we're staying in the conscious mind, the neocortex, and sexual pleasure and birth take place in the hindbrain, the primitive part, the part that we have with all other mammals. So we have to birth from that primitive space. And again, having that environment there. But once we have the safety, the privacy, we feel unobserved, we let that thinking brain dissipate and it's gone, then we can really access that hormonal flow in that place. And this is where we can fully enjoy kissing, nipple stimulation, masturbation, and I add, for those of you that are ready to really enjoy, vibrators. And that has to be something you want or have used in the past. But I think that we have to start talking about how do we unleash that sexual energy with our clients, and giving them permission to have whatever means for them will open that up, as well as to have the privacy, which may mean at times we've got to get out of the room too and say, I'm going to give you a few moments here to explore what unlocks your sexual pleasure.
So good, because really birth is a sexual act. Right? And I feel like culturally, it's like everything baby related is over here, everything sexual is over here, and they're kept really separate. But ultimately, birth is a sexual act, which is why unlocking sexual energy is so huge. And then my next tip is use sensual expansion as birth prep. So that really builds on it. You can use pleasure in two ways. So we've already talked about how you can bring pleasure into your birth environment, how you can use pleasure consciously to support your flow and to support the flow of labor and that of your clients' experience. But there's also a journey that each woman can take that I call sensual expansion. And what that is really learning to connect with your body, learning the language of the body, which is sensation, and learning how to feel more pleasure in the body. And that could be, for some women that's learning how to orgasm. For some women that's learning how to feel more pleasure in their orgasm. For some women it's learning to expand their orgasm and allow that pleasure to flow. But it's this journey that's really a lifelong journey of learning how to experience more pleasure in your body, because there is this energy stream of pleasure that is always, always pulsing through you. And usually most of us are completely disconnected from that. And so to begin that journey for yourself as a practitioner of learning what that's like, how to tap into that flow of pleasure in your own body, and then how to tap into it consciously, you start to build out the pathways in your body where it becomes much easier to access. And much easier to access in different circumstances. So you don't necessarily need, everything to be aligned in order to experience that level of pleasure, but you become more adept at experiencing ecstasy, orgasm in your body simply with your attention. So I really recommend this idea of using sensual expansion as birth prep, both for you as practitioners, because you can bring that, again, that tone into the birthing room, but also as a tool to work with your clients. And this doesn't necessarily have to look overtly sexual, though it can. It's really a beautiful journey about learning how to feel into your body and learning how to build out those pathways within your own body.
So true, right? And we all deserve to live in pleasure and be able to do that all the time, right?
Yeah, and it's a never-ending journey. It enhances life as well as birth.
It really does. It enhances every part of our life. So it's really a life skill. For me, it's always interesting that how we didn't consider pleasure just a life skill. And as you said, why we've separated pleasure and particularly sex from birth. I always joke around, like if we told men they were going to have something that was going to happen in their penis from 1 hour to 3 days, but they weren't going to think about sex, I think almost any male would be able to say, no way, like this has to somehow affect my sexuality in some way. But we've disconnected women so much from this aspect of ourselves and our bodies.
Yeah. And I think it goes way, way back to that story of Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden, which, whatever your religion or whatever your belief, that's like the prevailing global story of creation, which says that, women are not to be trusted. The feminine is not to be trusted. And the feminine includes our bodies and our cycles and how we create. So this is really the work that we're doing is really a reclamation of all of that.
Right. Feminine rising, right? Mm-hmm. So that leads to orgasmic birth. And I'm like, yeah. So I'm going to actually just read, because I always want to just quote, because Elizabeth Davis and I actually developed a definition. And our definition is broad enough to include those who describe birth as ecstatic, and specific enough to give voice to those who actually feel the contractions of orgasm at the climax, at the very moment of delivery. Many of our interviewees spoke of astounding pressure and sensation in the vagina as birth approached, followed by a flood of release and emotion as the baby emerged. Whenever a woman can look back on these moments with joy, emotional aspects of the birth are truly experienced as pleasurable. We call this orgasmic birth. And for me, it's really important to have that broad definition, because some people just assume orgasmic birth is someone that has what we call a birthgasm, right? An orgasm. And, I want to give voice that, yes, that's the ultimate orgasmic birth. And those people are incredibly blessed. But I wouldn't want anyone to make this a performance standard. We have enough pressure on us in giving birth that no one should feel that, they're adding to their birth plan or preferences or desires that they're going to have a birthgasm. If it happens, it's kind of the icing on top and the blessing, but any aspect of pleasure. And when I look up orgasmic, there's so many different definitions, from heightened physical and emotional sensation to extremely exciting or enjoyable. And often it's relating to sex, sexual activity, and romantic, but often just pleasant and pleasure. So really, orgasmic birth is this broad area, and it really, for me, is to give voice to the joy, the bliss, the ecstasy, the happiness, the transformation, the power, but not to take away that sometimes we can hold all of it, and there may be moments of pain and challenge, intensity. So again, people misunderstand that maybe, if they had any moments of pain, it wasn't orgasmic. That's not true. We can hold both pain and pleasure together. But I always love to know, and those of you that are with us right now, I'd love to have you, by that definition, say, did you have an orgasmic birth? Because a lot of people never considered their birth orgasmic because they only thought, well, I didn't have a birthgasm. But my birth, I didn't have a birthgasm either. I wish I knew what I knew today. But I definitely called my birth orgasmic because the incredible sensations of just tuning in and finding pleasure in my baby emerging from my body, and those moments of release, like right after an orgasm, that feeling that you have. I mean, I truly felt that after birth, and that incredible high of looking into my baby's eyes and just exploding with love. That's orgasmic. So I'd love to hear from many of you if applying this broader definition shifts anything in you, because I believe that it's everybody's birthright to have an orgasmic birth, and we need to start talking about it and sharing it.
Yes, 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 yes. So, you said something in that. It's like, a lot of women will look at these moments of intensity in their births and hold that as like, oh, I didn't have this experience that I was hoping to have, right? And that's part of what I call the shadow of birth, the shadow side of birth. And that's really my final tip, is we all need to embrace the shadow side of birth, which right now is pretty prevalent in the world around us. I definitely see us rising and reclaiming that, but there's a lot of shadow around birth. There's a lot of pain, there's a lot of trauma, there's a lot of stuff that emerges, which is not really doesn't seem in line with this ideal that Debra and I are holding. And we are holding this ideal not as a level or point of comparison. We're holding this ideal to kind of elevate the conversation about birth, to share what's possible. But it's by no means something that women should be judging themselves against. And I see that a lot, where, oh, but I freaked out. Honey, everyone freaks out in transition. It's okay. It's part of the flow of labor. So it's not, you didn't do anything wrong. I think that as practitioners, it can be especially heartbreaking when you're witnessing the shadow at play at a birth. And what I want to bring out into this conversation is that, just like in birth, you have this rhythm of contraction and expansion, we all have that in life too. Right? So contractions have this like bad reputation, globally we want to numb them, we want to avoid them. Just like in our own lives, if something difficult happens, we kind of, we have our different coping mechanisms, a lot of which is numbing, right? So what I actually would like to propose is, rather than numb, rather than avoid, embrace the shadow, feel the shadow. It's the resistance that causes pain. Whether it's a physical contraction in your body as you're giving birth to a baby, or a metaphorical contraction in your life. So contractions exist in labor to help you open, to help you expand, to help you become the woman that can birth her baby out through her body, right? So contractions have a purpose, and metaphorically they have a purpose as well. And I can share in my first birth with my son was very much in the shadow of birth. I had a very traumatic birth experience. But if I look at that experience from the perspective of my life's journey, that was a contraction in my life that led to a huge expansion, and me realizing, wow, if I ever want to give birth, I have to do it completely differently. So I'm so grateful for that experience, even though it was by no means an ecstatic birth. It was, much closer to a traumatic birth. But I'm so grateful for that experience because it set me on this trajectory of a healing journey and a huge expansion in my life. So I want to bring this forward because I think that, sometimes as practitioners, if you witness a birth that doesn't really feel like the sort of birth you would like to have for your client or that the client would want for herself, we need to understand that it's okay. Obviously we want to do everything to support to have the best outcomes, but shit happens in life, in birth. It's not always going to be the ideal. And so to have that understanding that all of these contractions, whether they're physical or metaphorical, exist for our expansion. They're all opportunities for our growth and for, opening to wider and wider pleasure. And I just want to end by saying actually that contraction and expansion is also, it's not just the rhythm of labor. It's not just the rhythm of life. It's also the rhythm of orgasm. You see it. Vulva in the throes of orgasm, it's contracting and expanding. So really embracing that shadow side and releasing the resistance to it, because it's within the resistance that there's pain.
Beautifully said. And so important, right? Because as you say, we are always, our life is filled with contraction and expansion and pain and challenge and opening. So important. And as birth keepers, so many birth keepers are struggling in this environment today. So great words of wisdom, Sheila. Love it. So that's our 10 tips, right? I can't believe that we boom, 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 went through them so quickly.
I think what I'll do after this, if you agree, Debra, is we have them kind of written out in bulleted points. So we can send them out to you all as like a follow-up. And I know there were a lot of people that wanted to be on this call that couldn't be, that will access the recording, but it might be fun to just have the 10 tips for you all to print out and, have at your side or hang in your office or, just as a kind of reminder to tap into the, this higher energy around birth and the pleasure that's available. And, Debra and I have been both on parallel and complementary paths around bringing pleasure into the world of birth. And so she has an incredible program. I have an incredible program. So we thought it would be fun to kind of combine and share. So do you want to fill everyone in or should I?
Go ahead, you start.
Okay, so as I mentioned earlier, I started a training for birth practitioners, and it's a 9-month program, which I very consciously created as 9 months instead of 9 weeks, because so much of what I do is body practice. So much of what I do is that sensual expansion piece that I mentioned, where you're really learning how to integrate principles of pleasure into your own body in ways that are so simple, so ridiculously simple that you can tap into them, every day, anywhere. But the idea is to really have you in this womb of like-minded practitioners where you're really looking at not just the information around how to bring pleasure into birth, but how you embody it for yourself, for your own nurturing as a practitioner, and also to share with your clients. So that's my program, which is beginning in June. And Debra has an incredible Pain to Power childbirth education program. Why don't you fill them in on that, and then we can share what the,
Sure. So Pain to Power is an online class that was initially designed for expectant parents to be, but we're finding, and I think Katerina is on here, she took our class, I know already. You might say something if you're listening there on the chat, but we also are opening it up. We're finding that many birth practitioners are really enjoying going through it, and it's everything from the basics of childbirth education, but really going deeper into pleasure. And we give you all kinds of resources and help you explore for yourself, kind of what Sheila was saying too, a little bit of how are you going to bring that to your clients. And I think that what we're doing is over 9 weeks, a little bit different because we're getting many people that are pregnant. So you'll be in a class where there will be expectant parents, and we hope you might invite your expectant parents to take it with you. But you have access for a full year. So if you wanted to break it out, and it's the thought, Sheila, is that they could take module by module over 9 months rather than 9 weeks, and you have the full year access. And I do have to just tell you that we're right almost ready for the release of a new site. So it's the content in a new way and expanded a bit. So if you were to sign up and have access now, you're a few weeks away from a big expanded class with a new way of taking it. And I'm seeing Sarah. All right. Thank you for saying that. I have to read it. The Pain to Power course is amazing. It's what enabled me to have ecstatic and orgasmic moments during the birth, despite being in an abusive environment. I'm sorry to hear of that, but I'm so grateful and definitely recommend it. Thank you, Sarah. And I'm really honored. You make me want to cry that we were able to support you even in that environment, and that you were able to transform that to some ecstatic and orgasmic moments. So thank you. And we have more. Anna, right? Thank you. I'm glad that you were able to share it with clients. So that's the goal, that you'll have these tools from it, both to bring your clients in, but to share with your clients. And I really couldn't feel more strongly that combining our class with Sheila's is giving the perfect combination so that you can really do your own work, and we can bring these two courses that are so complementary together. And Sheila, do you want to tell them? Because it's an unbelievable deal, almost so unbelievable. I was like, woke up this morning and I thought, Sheila, should we really offer this? It's like so good. But
it's so funny you say that, because I met with my mastermind group, and there's a group of women that have really been supporting me in business, and I shared it with them, and I had to like take their what are you doing? That is too low. What are you doing? So the funny thing is, so my program is priced at $895. And Debra's program is priced at $295. Is that right?
yes.
$295. And so when we were sitting and we were trying to figure out, and we really wanted to make it like it's a no-brainer for everyone, because we figured it is very complimentary. Like, I don't really teach childbirth ed. That's not what I do. And she's brilliant at it. And so it's the information together is like allowing you to really fly for yourselves, for your clients. It's so good. So we had come up with a price of $650 for the combined course, which at the time I was like, wait, Debra, how do we do that? Because that's even less than like just my course. Like, so
right.
We're not offering this to anyone outside of this webinar and the people that signed up. It's really something so special that we were just so excited to work together, so excited to offer something that we're really running it for a limited time. I don't know, Debra, until when? What do you think?
I think Mother's Day. I think this is the perfect Mother's Day gift for yourself. And we're all mothers, whether we're mothers or not, because we're mothering people in our communities. So it's a celebration for all of us as birth practitioners.
So what I think I'm going to do, I'm going to look up the link for the combined, and I'll post it in the chat box. So if any of you want to take a look at it, you can do that, as well as the links to our individual programs while we're finishing up the call. But we had some time, and we figured it would be fun to just do some open Q&A. You can ask us about our tips. You can ask us about our programs. You can ask us about, whatever you want. So why don't we open to Q&A, and I'll just kind of in the background find the links and put them up there so you can learn more about our individual programs and consider whether you want to do the joint program. And you can have the details like that.
Okay, and I want to say, I saw from Julie, and I just want to honor you, Julie. She said, one of my goals as a student midwife is to improve the perinatal care for stillborn mothers. Mm-hmm. I've had 2 stillborns myself, and that really touched me. I'm really sorry for your losses, and how incredibly brave you are to be kind of birthing that forward and offering your support and wisdom. I always, tell a lot in my workshop, I honor that. I've done a lot of work with indigenous cultures, as I shared the story earlier. And in indigenous cultures, the shaman is the person that's been greatly wounded and has healed themselves. And in healing themselves, they have have this wisdom, and they are able then to help and heal so many. So already just from your comment, I can feel how much and how wise you are, and how incredibly helpful you're going to be to the many people that you'll journey with when they have this situation. But you said, have we had experience with that? I certainly have been with families with a loss, been the doula and been present in the room, as well as journeyed with families that have had losses. And to open that term up, right, to loss, whether it be a stillborn, a miscarriage, an abortion, we as women often have many losses around childbearing. So I do think that these concepts are really important for them. And I think you bring up a really good point, because they often doubt their bodies in the situation. Their body has failed them. And so being able to use some of the techniques that Sheila and I are putting together, I think are invaluable for any person at any point, because when you do doubt your body, when you do go through that kind of a loss, to be able to come back to wholeness, to be able to come back and the time is right, even for moments of pleasure within that grief, is really important. So thank you, Julie, for sharing that and for asking that question. And Sheila, I'm sure, do you have other things to add to that?
I mean, I would lean back into that idea of embracing the shadow, that in honoring the grief, there is pleasure. And in resisting the grief, it hurts so much more. So however, you women that are in that situation can really create rituals, create circles of support to honor that grief. That's the way you tap into the ecstasy, because there is ecstasy in grief as well. And it's in the resistance to it, in that like space of I'm okay, that you're like gripping and holding, and that's really painful.
Thank you.
All right, so we have, in a community with lots of different natural childbirth classes, how do I help mine to stand out? You want me to take a stab at that?
Go ahead.
I think that everyone's got a unique voice. Everyone's got a unique place of passion and pleasure. I think for you to really look at, where do you get energy? Like, what are the things that excite you and turn you on about sharing this work with other people? How do you, if you can really tap into that and use that to share your work, I think that's where the gold is. Not really looking at what other people are doing, but looking at, what do you love? Like, what's your passion? What's your pleasure? And sourcing your classes from that place. And then I also just want to say, like, I think that there's natural birth, and then there's this idea that Debra and I are bringing forth of pleasurable birth, and it kind of takes it to the next level. So I would really encourage you, if that's some place where you're drawn, to really lean into that place.
Great advice. And you have a good question here, Sheila. Especially Katerina already took my course. So do you see her comment? How much is your course on its own?
Well, I mean, that's the funny thing, is my course on its own is actually more. So I would say this is really the best. Even my early bird price is more than this. So I would say that the best way to do it is through this, and that way you also get access to Debra's rebranded, and you get to do it within the community, because my early bird price is $8.95. So the time that you need to spend on it. Okay, so the way my course is structured, I don't know how many of you are familiar with B-School, but it's a fabulous online business school, and I've really been inspired at the way Marie Forleo created community around this idea of online business. And so the way my practitioner training is structured is really in the same vein. What I'm trying to do is build a community of practitioners that are really interested in this idea of pleasurable birth. So it's a 9-month course, but actually once you take it, you're invited in again year after year as my guest, because this journey of like deepening into the pleasure in our bodies is really an endless journey. You can always go deeper, you can always do more. So I'll just say that up front. So the amount of time to do the course is really like, how much time do you have? It could be a ton of time if you really want to take every practice and, do everything to the max. What I find is that everyone has their own pace. right? So I've done it 2 years now, and I'm going into my third year. And I see that some people have that stamina to really be able to stay strong till the end. And some people kind of like come in and out and in and out. And it's actually all perfect. In terms of outright time commitment, there's a 90-minute live class each month. And then there's also like modules that are released each month, which will probably take, to watch through them, it'll probably take about an hour. And then in addition to that, we go through something called the Ecstatic Birth Training Sessions, which is based on an online summit that I did, which Debra was actually a part of. So you get the wisdom of, 20 visionaries in the world of birth and female sensuality and female health and pleasure. So we go through those week after week after week. So that's another, let's say, hour per week. And then there are there are homework assignments, and the homework assignments are really like as much as you want to delve into them. So it could be a lot or it could be a little. I would say at its max, it's probably an hour to a month. And then we do all these body practices that take no more than 5 minutes. And those I really encourage daily as much as possible. So the long answer is it could be a lot, but the short answer is it's as much as you can digest, and you always have time, because it's not going to run out after the 9 months. We're going to start again. You always have time to delve in a little bit deeper and digest a little bit more. You want to take the next question, Debra?
There's not another question. And Julie, I just want to really honor you and thank you. I'm glad that both of us were able to touch you, and that's a real joy and honor to me. And I look forward to hearing more of your stories and hopefully staying connected. So how much time is my class? Again, that's a great question. It's, again, a little bit like Sheila. It's as little or as much as you want. Since it's 9 different modules, I would say that each module gives you a basic, and you could just take the core, but then we offer resources for those that want to go deeper. And I would say as birth practitioners, I would encourage you to really do the deeper portion of it. So each module could be like 3 to 5 hours if you really wanted to delve deeper into the resources we provide. And again, rather than do them, 9 weeks in a row, you could do them spread out with Sheila and those 9 months. So really taking, 3 to 5 hours a month on Pain to Power's online childbirth class, and then partner with Sheila, and you have a full year access on ours. So I hope that will be more manageable. And thank you, Sheila, for putting the links back up.
I feel like I could do this all day long. I love this. Oh, we have another question. I have a question more about supporting women. How do you hold pleasure space if something goes wrong in the birth? For instance, if the baby doesn't descend for 10 hours and the mother is getting exhausted.
Want me to do that?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. So I always say that we have these gaps in between, right? We often think about labor like one big Charlie horse. And, when we just write 10 hours of hard labor, we don't feel the gaps. We don't feel the contraction and the expansion. And what we want to do as doulas and birth providers is really move into that expansion time, that space in between the surges. And even when we're exhausted, there's no reason why we can't be doing pleasurable touch, why we can't be whispering those loving words in the ear. And I know it sounds kind of funny sometimes, but I have a set list of like funny YouTubes. And, if you just take a minute or two and you're exhausted and you feel crummy, and think about a day that it's just a crummy day, and then something happens and you just get one of those belly laughs. It's just so funny. You can't help for 30 seconds, but just laugh. In those 30 seconds, you actually shift your hormones, you shift your attitude, and that brings you into those feel-good or pleasure hormones. It releases your beta endorphins, and those are your hormones of pleasure. So there are many little tips and tricks. Sheila and I gave you just a little nugget today of what we cover in our courses, but really that's what we're going to be teaching you in different ways, is how do we constantly look at the dark side, hold the pleasure, and move these different ways that we can be shifting energy even amongst the challenge. And on top of of that, I would actually say to spinning babies, and there's so many other actual techniques that can help. And I don't know in your statement exactly what was going on, and we don't have time today to kind of really delve out what were used, what wasn't, but it might be by developing a broader comfort kit of techniques that sometimes we can help that baby shift.
I just wanted to add also, because she's asking if the couple wants to go to plan B, meaning a C-section. I just wanted to add that one of the things I really work on with my private clients is looking at the C-section, because sometimes it's like this looming fear, right? And oh my God, if I have a C-section, then all is lost, right? Well, but there are conditions under which every woman is more than willing to have a C-section. And it's really understanding what are those conditions for her that she and her partner are okay with having a C-section, and what are kind of the parameters of where she's birthing, and are they aligned? And then to really look at, okay, if I am going to have a C-section, how can I make that the most empowering, pleasurable experience it could possibly be? And really giving some attention and thought to that ahead of time, so that it's not like, oh, we're going to C-section, all is lost, right? You can really consciously, and there's a lot of resources online right now about gentle cesarean and different ways women are approaching cesarean. And as a practitioner, you can guide your client through that. Just think we did it.
We have an expanded section in Pain to Power on gentle cesarean. So we just really updated that just for that, because cesarean can be life-saving and also can be what someone needs at that moment. So I agree with you, Sheila, learning all the different ways we can do that with more joy and respect and dignity.
Yeah, and I find it's like a huge warning sign if a woman's going like this. I don't want to have a C-section, right? Like if she's unwilling to look at it, then it's a looming fear in her body, and that can sometimes govern the birth. It's really good to, like, I think now in the age of The Secret, people are afraid to look at their fears because they think they're going to create them. But fears live in your body regardless. So the more you can really look at them, you can disarm them, as opposed to have them run the show unconsciously. We have time for one more. We got one more. What do we say to someone who has a C-section and is really depressed and feeling inadequate? You want me to take a stab?
Yeah, go ahead.
I think you bring it back to this idea of expansion and contraction. And what is it, why is it that she feels inadequate? Like, what is it that was in that C-section that she felt like, she let herself down in some way? Because there's a lot of that's a question that has a lot of layers to it. Is it that, you felt like you did not advocate for yourself, you did not put yourself in a situation where you could have the best possible birth experience? Is it any of those things? You did not have practitioners to support you? Or is it or is it the case that the C-section was really necessary, but you feel it's bringing stuff up for you? So I think that's a difficult question because it's got so many layers to it, but the more you can kind of tease out why depressed, why inadequate, and to use that as a jumping point. So that's the contractive moment in their life, and use that understanding as a place to expand.
And I would add, as a doula too, that when I hear that anyone's really depressed postpartum, I would always share with them the unhappiness after childbirth, the Edinburgh postpartum scale. And I think it's really important that anybody that's feeling depressed for any reason, and cesarean could be one, but there are many other things that cause birth trauma or cause disappointment in birth, that we really hear that. And being that I'm not a trained licensed therapist, and maybe not all of you are, it would be for me to kind of encourage them to connect and find the resources from Postpartum Support International. And there is a website that I really recommend practitioners use called PATCH, PATTCH, and it's for both practitioners, but for anyone that's had a depressing or traumatic birth. And there are many people on there with difficult cesarean births. You actually join a community, and there are therapists, wonderful therapists, including Penny Simpkin, Phyllis Klaus, Kathy Kendall Tackett, that are supporting the people in a private forum. And then to find, I always say the good and bad news is many places around the world, the good news is we have many birth therapists that specialize in working with people that are suffering traumatic births or postpartum depression. And the bad news is that we need them, that a day that should be ecstatic and a positive memory for everyone is turning into trauma for so many reasons that don't have to be. So I would just caution that, identify and find your resources, know your websites and your providers in your community to engage them with.
I just wanted to add one thing too, is for you as a practitioner, if you feel scared in your own body, that's a good sign that you should be referring people to somebody else.
Great one.
Yeah. Okay, this will be our last question because we're almost out of time. How do you introduce this to people who are convinced that birth is extremely painful and terrible? I've got like the shortest answer for that is watch Debra's movie.
Yes.
Debra's movie. It's available on Amazon Prime for like $2. Come on.
And now on our website, we're streaming. Go to orgasmicbirth.com. Yeah, you can stream or rent, and we're hoping in the next couple of weeks to have it up in at least 5 other languages. So we're getting our subtitles online for the first time soon.
Congrats. Yeah, I mean, I feel like that is like the biggest consciousness raising piece out there. You did such a great job at really laying out the issues, but also like you show so many different types of births so people can really relate and really make choices based on what feels good to them.
Oh, thank you. Well, thank you. This has been such a pleasure just getting this time together with you, Sheila, and with everyone that's joined us. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you all. It's fun to have you all live with us and to see your chats and to read your comments and to hear your questions and to really feel you. So we'll send out a follow-up email with the 10 tips, with the recording, and also with the links to sign up for our programs. We hope that you'll join us. We feel really excited about what we're offering and think it's pretty unique. So if you're feeling the call, we'd really love to have you join us.
Yes, definitely. And I'm throwing this out there live, but if we take all of you that join us, it would be fun to do this periodically and come together and have private, webinars for those of you that are with us together.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I said, I could do this all day long.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, that's how I know I'm doing the work I'm supposed to be doing, because I could do this all day long. So thank you, Debra, for playing with me.
Oh, thank you, Sheila. And thank you. I see Debbie just put joyous birth to my niece, actually cousin Lauren. So thank you all. Send lots of good, pleasurable birth energy this way to Denver.
Yes. All right, everyone. Lots of love. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you.
Bye, Debra.
Bye.